killing wolves is supposed to teach me to be a great lord of men? Aren't there any books on the subject? William Shackley. In the year 1192, while King Richard the Lionheart was on his way home from fighting in far-off Jerusalem, the lords of Shackley Castle were out hunting wolves by moonlight. Bitter cold, an aching backside, and hours of fruitless searching had made the oldest, Sir Osbert, irritable. Will Shackley, the youngest, listened patiently as the old knight passed the time by trying to scare the breeches off the lad. "It's this bloody weather," said Osbert, beating the crust of frost out of his enormous beard. "Drives them beasts out of Sherwood looking for something, anything, to eat. Bold enough to challenge a man on horseback, even." He leaned forward in his saddle and winked at Will. "Or a young lord. They wouldn't bother with a tough piece of gristle like me when they can have a juicy young lordling. That's why I'm not riding up there with your uncle. I'm sticking close to you, wolf-bait." At 13 years old, Will was used to the old knight's teasing. He'd been raised on it. "Well, while the wolves are devouring me," answered Will, "I'll be sure to holler loud enough that you'll know where to swing that mighty sword of yours. Wouldn't want your old eyes to mistake a shrub for the enemy. Again." Osbert sat back in his saddle for a moment before snorting and breaking into a huge grin. "No, we wouldn't want that," laughed the old man. "Wouldn't want that." Osbert laughed himself into a coughing fit that ended in a string of curses. He spit out something wet and nasty-looking onto his sleeve. Osbert shouldn't be out in this weather, thought Will, but the stubborn knight wouldn't be left behind. Bold Sir Osbert had never shied away from a battle, even if it was only against a bunch of skinny, half-frozen wolves. But his best days were long past, and he'd traded in battle cries for complaints of stiff joints and damp weather. Will couldn't imagine the flesh-and-blood enemy who could make an end of the tough old warrior, but this night's biting cold just might. "I'd hoped it might snow," said Will, looking up at the darkening sky. The clouds had hung grey and threatening all day, but the ground remained dry as dust. "We'd have an easier time following their tracks in fresh snow." "Ah, Jeff will track them, snow or no. He's part hound, that uncle of yours. And the moon's rising to light our ride home. But a blanket of Christmas white would have been nice, taking my mind off this freezing wind, at least. I'm chattering what few teeth I have left down to knobs." There hadn't been so much as a snowflake in England this year, despite the terrible cold. But the trees, thick with hoarfrost, still glittered white in the moonlight. The wind blew easily through the bare branches, and cut through leather and furs. This was a sort of cold that settled deep in your bones, and all across England people were suffering for it. "Weather like this'll have those wolves knocking on the doors of your father's own castle," said Osbert. "That's after they've eaten all the peasants, of course. Natural order of things that the peasants go first. Only fitting." The old man chuckled at his own joke, but his laughter sounded hollow and out of place among those dark trees. Squinting into the woods, Osbert muttered, "Useless, not a living thing stirring in these woods. Maybe they fled back to Sherwood to hunt bandits. Nothing for them here." Will nodded and tried to picture these trees in the summer, green and lush. These woods belonged to his father, Lord Roderick Shackley. Lord Roderick had sailed off with King Richard to fight in the Crusades, and he'd been gone fighting overseas for over 2 years. But now the king was coming home, and Will's father with him. Will and his playmate, Milo, fled here to his father's woods whenever Nan came at them with the kitchen spoon. The last time had been just a few months ago, when they'd stolen into the molasses. Over the course of a few days, the two of them had nearly emptied the larder. It hadn't been hard for Nan to guess the culprits. A pair of sticky boys with stomach aches were easy to spot in a castle full of knights. They'd come here to escape her spanking spoon, but the trees had looked so much friendlier then. On a cold winter's night like this, the branches reached for you like bony fingers. The comforting hum of crickets was replaced with the howling wind, and instead of a sack of stolen sweets, Will now wore a heavy sword.